Now, to be a good photographer, speaking technically, you really have to have control of the technique. It's a craft, and so you have to get to know your camera and to be able to use it to make music. If you think about it as a musical instrument, you can't just pick up the instrument and make music. You got to learn that camera. Okay, and that's the technical side. And then the other side is the aesthetic side. It's just seeing. And when I lecture on the ships, we have every range of person on the ship, from the point and shoot person to someone who's coming with more gear than I have. And for my money, I like the person who can see. The cameras are getting smarter and smarter. And so don't get bogged down with the technical and pay more attention to seeing. And hopefully I can point out, I can inspire you with some of the seeing part. In the meantime, I'm just going to take you through some of the things I've done for Geographic and tell you some funny stories behind them. This was up in the Adirondacks. This was for Traveler. And I found this nice location with Whiteface in the background. And I found a guy who restored these Adirondack guide boats. And I thought, I like to fly fish, and so I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a guy standing out there at dawn fly casting? And I found a guide, and I made an arrangement, to borrow the boat, and the guide would meet me at 5 in the morning. And so I carried the boat into this pond and waited for the guide, who never showed up. So what could I do? I put the boat in the water, I took a few snapshots, and it ended up on the cover. So I'm really glad that he didn't show up. And then I got in the boat. You see, look at the pond is like glass there. I got in the boat and I rode around, and I just fell in love with this boat. I ended up buying the boat. That cost me that day. But then I used the boat for various photo shoots. I actually had Fortune call me up one day, and they said, well, we're doing a spread on retirement, and we'd like you to just go anywhere in the country you want to go and come back with a picture that says, I want to retire here. So, and it was going to be like a one package deal, fee, expenses, everything, put a budget together. So I thought, let's go to Hawaii, right? So I put the whole budget together, they approved it, and before I left, I went in my backyard. I live in Mystic, Connecticut. I put the boat in the water, borrowed some topsiders from a neighbor, and rowed out to another neighbor's boat and took this picture. I sent it in, and they loved it. So that was it. So they paid me as if I went to Hawaii, and I went in my backyard. Yeah. The boat paid for itself that day. Yeah. This is down in Georgia Sea Islands, in Cumberland Island, and I saw this nice moss-covered road, and the innkeeper where I was staying, she was attractive, and I asked her if she could walk down this road. And I'm photographing her. I'm very happy, and there's a house to my left. And this woman comes out of the house and says, I have a pet deer. Would you like to borrow my pet deer? Yeah, let me think about it. Sure, why not? Yeah. And that ended up on the cover. So sometimes, it's better to be lucky than good. This is up in Yoho National Park, which is west of Lake Louise. And I was there doing a story. And I found this group that was hiking up to this cabin here, Abbott Pass, 11,000 feet. And the idea was that we would hike up here, and then we would traverse and go down the glacier down to Lake Louise the next day. So we spent the night there, and we roped up because there's, we're on a glacier which has little crevasses. And we started going down the glacier, and we got to the first crevasse, and the guide jumped across, and then the gentleman who was in front of me, his wife was next, and she jumped across. And you had to stand next to the person while they jumped across, so there was enough rope give. And then the gentleman who was in front of me, he stood there, and he was afraid of heights. And it was no more than jumping from the table to maybe the first row into snow. But he stood there for 20 minutes and talked to himself, and he got tighter and tighter. When he jumped, he broke his ankle, or when he landed. And so we had to call in a helicopter. They came with a basket, and the guides came down and they took him away. And the rest of us had to hike back up to Abbott Pass. And so I got lucky because on the way back up, I saw this shot and I unroped and ran over here and got this shot. And his wife was very lucky too, because after they dropped him off, they came back and one of the guides came down on one of those wires and she wrapped herself around this young buff guy and got airlifted back up to Abbott Pass. She asked me, she was very excited, "Did you get that shot? How's your husband?" You know.
We didn't get the shot of it being posted.
And so that ended up on the cover. Then I was in Yellowstone in September, which is the time to go to Yellowstone, not July and August. And if you go out at dawn, it's just so magical. And they list the times of the geysers that are supposed to erupt, give or take. Well, Old Faithful, they got it down to the minute. This is Castle Geyser. It goes off every 6 hours, give or take 4 hours. Yeah. So I went out in the dark, and you arrive, and it's like, I wonder if it already went off. And my idea in my mind's eye was to shoot it, with the sun rising and the geyser going off. So I stood there easily an hour, and as sun is starting to come up, I'm like, first I'm praying, and then I'm cursing, come on, let's go. And it went off, perfect timing, and I got that shot. So a lot of it's just being patient, and sometimes it's you're walking along, you're seeing a picture. I didn't find that interesting, but a lot of times you just take pictures because you have to, because you want to, and so anyway, it's not a special picture to me, but it became special when it ended up on the cover. Now you see. They've added sky to this picture. I shoot a lot of horizontals. I don't shoot up and down that much. And now at Geographic, at the Yellow magazine, they won't, well, anywhere at Geographic, they will not alter the picture, take out trash or telephone wires or anything. There's no manipulation. We can dodge and burn, especially in digital now. You have to if you're shooting raw. Personally, I use Lightroom. But they will add this sky, at least Traveler will. Just had to say that. And this was down in Grenada, and I was walking along, and I saw this guy. He was way out here in this boat, and people in the Caribbean, people all over the world, when I'm taking their picture and I'm close to them, I'll always ask their permission. But if they're silhouette and they're tiny and they're out here, well, you can't really yell at them, or the picture's gone by the time you ask. So I was shooting him as he's coming into shore, and I walked along the beach to get in position. And he came up to the boat. He was pretty angry with me. And he goes, "Hey, man, you didn't ask my permission to take my picture, man." I said, "No, it's okay. It's National Geographic." "Oh, everything's cool, man." I couldn't ask him to do that again. They added some sky to it, yeah. This was in Malta. I went to Peter's Pool. Oh, I like you guys. It's good. The air conditioning's good effect here. So, yeah, the writer had on the list, go to Peter's Pool, and I went down there. There wasn't really much happening. I mean, it's a beautiful place. All of a sudden, this guy shows up, and he starts diving over here in the water. So I went over and asked him if he could just dive a few times for me over at this location, which he did. And it ended up on the cover. Now, my very first assignment for Geographic Traveler was to go to Acadia National Park. It's right up the road in Maine. It's a beautiful place. And I went down to Bass Harbor Light at sunset to shoot, and it was completely foggy. And I love fog, so I was down there. I was very happy shooting the water moving, doing long exposures. And right at sunset, the fog pulled back about a quarter of a mile, a couple hundred yards, and I got this shot. And 5 minutes later, the fog moved back in. And I was very lucky and got that shot. Yeah, wait 5 minutes, yeah. And so that was my first assignment for Traveler, and so I was very excited. It was on the cover, and I thought, okay, I'll be working for Traveler a lot. And I called up my picture editor, and I said, okay, we got the cover. What's next? He says, don't worry, I'll call you. It was a year later that he called, and then I worked regularly for them. I'd say pretty much for 10, 15 years. And then I got a call out of the blue. It had always been my dream to shoot for the Yellow magazine too. And I was always told that they couldn't take chances on someone new. And I guess one day they got pretty desperate. And I know of at least 2 other photographers who turned down an assignment to go to Acadia for the Yellow magazine. This is 10 years ago. And they called Traveler, the editor at Traveler, and asked him who was the best landscape photographer that he knew. And he, being my new best friend, suggested me. And so they called me up and asked if I wanted to go to Acadia for a month in October. Well, of course, I thought it was one of my friends, you know, pulling a joke on me, but it actually was. So my first assignment for Traveler being Acadia, my first assignment for the Yellow magazine was Acadia. So I got to go there for a month. And I watched the weather, which is what I do all the time. And I saw this one morning, it was going to be clear, cold, and maybe there'd be some fog. I lined up a helicopter. I drove 2 hours to where the helicopter was and found a little morning fog. But sometimes you just see pictures driving along. You know, I was just driving along the road and this spot of color caught my eye, and I just pulled off the road and worked it for a while. And I got this shot that ran. I like to shoot on the edge of darkness, right? And early in the morning, late in the evening. That's my time. Long exposures, you get that silky look, you know, the camera's on a tripod. And then I was shooting this, and right when I was done shooting this, it was raining a little bit. I looked down at my feet, and this was right at my feet. And so I just, you know, changed, no, same lens, I think, pointed it down, and I shot that for a while. Then I thought I could improve on it. I moved one of the leaves. Well, I completely ruined the picture. Yeah. So, I mean, nature is so perfect, it's hard to improve on it. This was a trail that I had found that, you know, was all these white birch trees, and it was beautiful. And who was asking about white birch trees? Yeah, Acadia, right there. And so I kept going back to this as the leaves started turning. And I was very happy because we had like 3 storms come through in that month. And everyone was complaining about how bad the weather was. And I was like thrilled, because I love inclement weather. And so what you want to do is to make it look like your pictures are dangerous, but you're not putting yourself in any danger, right? Yeah. I don't want you to read about me one day that I got swept out to sea. Approaching storms. I'll talk a little bit about graduated neutral density filters, which I used at the top of this to darken the top. And of course now, you know, Lightroom has that. How many people are working with Lightroom? Yeah. How many people are shooting RAW? Okay. Yeah, those of you who are not shooting RAW, that's your next step. You know, and then you too can spend half your life in front of a computer. I used to love to shoot. I loved to be out there, and now I'm in front of a computer. This was another storm that came through, and this wave actually came up and over me and got my camera wet, made B&H very happy. No, actually, it kept working. And my last day at Acadia, you know, I looked at a map. I was shooting digital, and so I could see the pictures, and I was like, what picture don't I have? Well, I didn't have like a coastline picture with what they call mountains in it. And so I looked at the map and said Otter Cliffs, I could get that shot. So I went down here at sunrise, and it was mostly overcast. I set up the camera, but I saw this little sliver of blue sky, and I thought the sun could come up and come through there. So I set up the tripod, found the composition, and waited. And I had about 5 minutes of light, and I got that nice light there. And that was a good last day at Acadia. And then for the last night, I thought I would go to Jordan Pond, set up the camera, point it directly north, and do a star trail shot, right? Where you can open up the camera for multiple hours, and you get this circle around the North Star. So I went to the Jordan Pond and set up 2 cameras, and film and digital, and waited for it to get dark, but it never got dark, because as soon as it started to get dark, the northern lights came on.
Oh, you lucked out.
I lucked out, yes, yeah. And so actually the interesting thing about this is a digital shot. To my eye, the light show was over. I mean, it was so intense. It was almost too intense for the magazine. And so the camera was still recording this image while my eye only saw black. So, you know, there's no excuse to ever say you're going to bed because the camera can still see stuff. So I'm going to quickly take you through some of the other locations that I've been to for Geographic, Death Valley. So once I got my foot in the door, then the secret was to keep proposing stories. Now, I'd say half the stories you see in the magazine are proposed by photographers. And so I proposed Death Valley. Before I go somewhere, you know, I'm studying the maps of it, I'm online, and I'm looking for all the locations. This lady said she's going to Acadia later this summer. You know, go Google Acadia images and go through and just see where you think there is a picture that, of course, you can make better or is an interesting place to hang out. And so I do that. And I came up with, you know, and then I look at sunrises and sunsets, and so I knew the moon was going to set. When it was full, it was going to line up with Zabriskie Point. And so I went there to Zabriskie Point, and there's a parking lot there, okay? So here's the puzzling thing. I'm trying to figure out, why is there always a great photograph wherever there's a parking lot? You know? And when the first time I went to Yosemite Valley, how many of you been to Yosemite, California? I mean, have you noticed that wherever there's a parking lot, there's an Ansel Adams photograph taken there? What came first, the Ansel Adams or the parking lot? Yeah. He's not around to ask. So here's this parking lot, sunrise, moon set. I shot that. Then I turned around 180 degrees. I shot into the light, and I saw that. And then the sun came up and went into a little bit of haze, and 90 degrees to the two of them was this picture. So whenever, you know, you go to a national park, check out the parking lots.
How do you get in there? Do you walk in there, or are there...
They're all shot from the parking lot. All three of those images. Those images, these three images were all shot between this end of the room and that end of the room. Not that I'm lazy or anything. I like to hike.
Where's the shot of the parking lot?
There is the shot of the parking lot, since you asked. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. So I had just gotten into hanging cameras from kites. And I found a guy who was playing around with it and made kites and could fly them. And so I brought him with me to Death Valley. And so the camera's hanging from the kite. You can see the string. And he's operating the kite, and I'm operating the camera. And at that point, I think we had a little spy cam on the back of the viewfinder so we could see on the Game Boy, and we have a servo so we could go 90 degrees and 360. But we found out that Death Valley is surrounded by mountains, and there's only two kinds of wind in Death Valley. There's no wind, or it blows like crazy. And so we got an anemometer, there it is, 0. So how do you beat nature? You get a weather balloon. And so we got a weather balloon. We hung a camera from the weather balloon. That's me, that's Jim. And so the weather balloon is tethered by 2 lines, and we get pictures like this. Yeah. More toys, right?
How do you position it?
It goes up in the air, and we have 2 lines that are tethered, and we can walk around that way. I have another one that only hangs with 1. So here we are at the playa in Death Valley. This is an old freshwater lake that is filled up with silt, like Lake Mead is and Lake Powell is. And so it's like very fine mud, and when it gets wet and the wind blows, there are rocks on it, and they leave these trails. They're actually blown like this, and they leave these trails. It's really cool. But no one has ever seen the rocks move because it's so soft, the mud, when it rains. So I thought, well, if no one's seen the rocks move, I'll take a couple home, I'll put them in the backyard and watch them. And so wherever I go, I always try and take some aerials, okay? And having a private pilot's license and having owned an airplane, I'm very comfortable in the air and I can tell the pilot what I want. And so preferably a helicopter, but affordable, or fixed wing airplanes. And if you go somewhere, you know, check out the local airport. They have Cessnas, which are high wing airplanes, two-seaters. They're not much money to charter. You only need an hour at sunrise or sunset. And so you can fly around at Death Valley and you can get really nice patterns going on, just looking straight down. Death Valley is really cool. It's our largest national park in the lower 48. It goes from 282 feet below sea level to 11,000 feet. And this is Badwater, 282 feet below sea level. So I shot here late at sunset. You can see I used a graduated ND to darken the sky a little bit. And then I stuck around there and did a time exposure at night. And I opened it up. So here's the star trail I was talking about before, but this is probably maybe 1 hour. I was only, you know, I lit the foreground with a flashlight. And so first I made a series of exposures just for the flashlight. I wanted to know what the flashlight was going to be, the exposure. So it was like 30 seconds. And so then I did an exposure where I opened up the shutter and left it open, did my flashlight for 30 seconds, and I walked around talking to myself. And then I couldn't find the camera again. And by the time I found it, you know, 20 minutes turned into an hour, so it was a little better star trail. And yeah, it's a crazy place. And they have walrus that come out on the full moon in Death Valley. And they have these really great sand dunes there, which as a photographer, you know, you go nuts there because of the patterns. Yeah. This is early in the morning. The wind had blown really hard, so it covered up all the footprints. And then I went out. Death Valley, yeah. And then, oh, what time of the year? You do not want to go to Death Valley in July or August. June, July, or August. And I did go through there once, you know, and I went to Badwater in, I think it was July. I got out of the car, I had a bottle of water with me, and I walked quarter of a mile. The bottle of water was gone, and I was wondering if I was going to make it back to the car. It's like 120 degrees there. It's one of the hottest places in the country. So the wind was blowing really hard here, but I loved those patterns. And then same windstorm, as the sun was setting, I went up to backlight it. I found a hill to climb up on. Now I'm just going to take you through, just to teach you a little bit about light. Okay, the camera's hanging from the balloon. There's no wind. Okay, so I put the camera up late in the afternoon. I got a polarizer on, darken the sky. And as the sun is going down, you can see these, I call this high milk. The clouds are coming in. And so I'm concerned that, you know, they're going to break the sunset, block the sun as it goes down. And sure enough, the sun has gone into this high milk. But out west, the clouds are so high sometimes that the sun can come underneath them and light them. So I thought maybe that's a possibility. And besides, the nearest bar was about 2 hours away, so I was in no rush, right? And so I just waited there. It hasn't gotten dark yet. And now it looks like it's starting to light up a little bit. Look, it is lighting up here, and it's creating some color here. And it got better, and it got better. Isn't that amazing? So, you know, don't necessarily go just because it's cocktail hour. You might want to stick around. And then eventually, you know, it got dark. And here's one of those lines that got it in the picture. And they always like to have a picture of us showing how hard we work when we're on location. So I thought I would put that one in. So then I proposed Glacier National Park, Waterton Glacier. It's a peace park between Canada and the US. It's in Montana. It's like Yellowstone without the people. It's pretty amazing. Again, I chartered an airplane, flew over it, got that shot. Then this is July 3rd. This is my first day at Acadia, and I drove up to the top of Logan Pass, and there's a visitor center over here, and there's a boardwalk that comes up and goes across here. And, you know, I know the national parks, they close sensitive areas. You know, they're right on top of it. And there's all this glacier lily blooming here. And so I walked along the boardwalk and I saw this beautiful glacier lily, and where I'm standing is an incredible field of glacier lilies. And I thought, maybe the area is closed. So I went back to the visitor center and asked if the area was closed, and the ranger looked at me, like I was crazy. Did you see any signs that said it was closed? No. Well, then it's not closed. Great, thank you. So I came back up here and I walked across the snow and I came up to this field and I turned around and I saw this shot. And so I took this picture, ran in the magazine, but I wasn't happy with it because it's not a brilliant sky. So I came back the next day and I walked up there and I got to the boardwalk, and wouldn't you know it, here, 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 here are signs that say closed, sensitive area. I thought, isn't that funny? But I got the last laugh because it ran in the magazine and it got picked up by the post office and they made a stamp out of it. Yeah. So it's a good thing I didn't get back there the next day. I had an approaching storm with lightning, and so I went out in this field and I was trying to time it with taking the exposure with the lightning, and it was the middle of the day, so I couldn't do long exposures. So the lightning would go and I'd push the shutter and I'd miss it, and the lightning would go and I'd push the shutter, and meanwhile the lightning's moving towards me. And so I decided that once the hair on the back of my head stood up, I'd leave. I found out when I got home, I got one exposure and then I got out of there, but I found out when I got home there's a thing called lightning trigger, which you can buy at B&H, and I bought one, and it works. But the problem is, let's say in this situation you put the lightning trigger on, sure, you get all the lightning as it's coming towards your camera, but it's raining. So at some point you have to get out there and get your camera, right? But by then the lightning's like over you. So I haven't figured that out yet.
Are these shots all handheld?
Are these shots all handheld? No.
Like this one?
That is on a tripod because I had if I don't use a tripod, my horizon lines look like this a lot of the time. This one's on a tripod, and I'll just tell you a funny story about this. I saw this happening, with the poplar trees, it's being flooded, and I walked down there, and as I'm walking down across a meadow, I saw a lot of rocks turned over. Now I'm in Glacier National Park, there are a lot of grizzly bears there. And I know that bears will turn over rocks to eat the grubs underneath. And so I'm looking around, there's no bear, okay. So, and I always carry pepper spray with me. And I'm very happy, I'm working down there, there's a few bugs, but put my camera bag down, the one I bought at B&H, and no bear spray here though, no pepper spray. And so I put that in the camera bag, and I'm very happy, and I hear this car horn honk. And I turn around, there's like 6 cars that have stopped on the road because they all want to see the bear mauling. There is now a bear between me and the cars. So I go diving for the pepper spray, and I come up, I take the safety off, and it spritzes just a little bit, not in my face, thank goodness. And I'm looking for the bear. While he's taking off, he's freaked out by the whole thing. So I go back to work, still mosquitoes around, I'm wiping my face, and that's when I realized I had pepper spray on my fingers. So what lens was I using here? I used the 16 to 35 a lot. And you guys can, when you look at my pictures, you can kind of try and figure out for yourself what lens I'm using. This, I was just walking along the side of a lake. There was no wind on the lake. I just had a handheld camera and normal lens, and I'm looking down into the water here. So it's about, this wide, looking through here. It was this nice pattern, and I actually came back here a couple of days later. The wind had blown and had all the rocks were just laying there. There was no pattern at all. This is another sunrise, where it just happened to be that it was a stormy day, but there was a little break in the cloud as the sun came up. And so I got that. And then while I was there, the Boy Scouts decided they would do a backpacking trip into Redfish Lake. And so they thought it would be fun to take fireworks with them.
Whoops. Oh, I know it.
Yeah, it was a dry summer. And so anyways, it was pretty amazing. I was shooting from the other side of the lake. I mean, you know, these trees are 100 feet tall. You know, the flames are like 300 feet. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. But I left there because I heard about a moose that was 2.5 miles up a trail. So I went running up this trail, passing people who were coming down and all telling me how wonderful the moose is right there by the side of the trail, and running up there. And just when I got there, and there's the moose, and there's 2 photographers, one with a digital 2.25. Pretty amazing. He had a lot of money. Anyways, right when I got there, the moose got out of the water, walked in front of us, and went up into the bushes. Whereupon the 2 photographers turned around and said, "You just missed it. It was great." I think they rehearsed that. And so I was pretty upset. I watched the moose. He went up and he laid down in the willows, and he took a nap. And I could watch his antlers going up and down and up and down. And then people were coming back from hikes or going up, and I'm just standing there, and everyone thinks, you know, why is he standing here? I waited for an hour while that moose slept, and then he got up. He was waiting for the light to get right. And then he came down, he got in position, I got the shot, and then he didn't stay there long, and he got up and took off again. This was a long hike to try and get a glacier. There used to be 130 glaciers in Glacier National Park at the turn of the century and in 1900, and now there's 27 left. This was a hawk that was sitting on a rock, and as I pulled into this parking lot, I saw the hawk. I backed the car up, got the long lens out of the back of the car, put the window down, and drove to a point where I knew I wasn't going to bother him. A lot of times with animals and birds in particular, you open up that door, they're gone. But if you stay in the car, you know, especially in Africa, it works. You don't want to get out of the Jeep in Africa. And, you know, so I stood there. Again, I waited probably 20 minutes while that hawk stood on the rock. He finally took off, and I was going like this to follow him up. What he was really doing was, there was a rodent underneath the rock. So he went like this and went down. I got the one frame, and then I'm like going, where is he? But he got the rodent and took off.
What millimeter?
This is a 500 millimeter lens. And so I had pre-focused it, you know, and thought about the exposure and everything. So it probably was on manual. Although I shoot on auto aperture priority 95% of the time. Okay, and this was September 21st, it wasn't my last day, but it snowed so hard they closed the road. I went up as far as I could to Logan Pass. I hiked the rest of the way up. It was a winter wonderland there. There weren't really any pictures there. I came back to my car, and I'm standing by my car with my gear, and these guys came by. And about 15 minutes later, it really started snowing, and I got this shot. And yeah, that was a special moment. So they ran both those pictures, taken within 15, 20 minutes of each other. What I say about parking lots. This is a parking lot in Glacier. I happened to go back here 6 mornings in a row before I got the sunrise I wanted. One day the wind was blowing so hard, I thought, how could I capture the wind blowing? And so I put the camera on a tripod and I experimented with different exposures. And that's the beautiful thing about digital. You can see it. You know, in the old days, we used to shoot a lot of film, different things, and we didn't know really until we got home what worked. And then by the time we got out there again, we had forgotten it, speaking for myself. And I got the airplane again, and I went back. Okay, I'm going to run through these quickly. Glacier National Park, or Great Smoky Mountains National Park, our most visited national park. Another photographer had gone down there to shoot it for the magazine. He was there for 2 weeks. He came back, he said, you know, there's really nothing to shoot here. And so they called the guy, you know, who'll do anything. And so they sent me down there. I said, well, let's shoot it over 4 seasons, because I figure, how can you go wrong if you get 4 chances at it? And usually when I find something I really like, you know, I'll shoot it from here, I'll get lower, I'll get higher, I'll walk around it, I'll work it, I'll find the best angle. This particular picture, I took one frame And I liked the composition, I liked everything about it, except for I didn't like this leaf, and it was very dewy. I couldn't really walk out there and remove the leaf. I would have left prints. And this really bothered me, and I wasn't going to pull that up either. So I shot one frame, and wouldn't you know it, they ran this as a 2-page spread. Pretty unusual. And sometimes, it's better to shoot the back, the unexpected thing, right? So it's a longer lens, shot wide open. And while I was there, I was walking across a meadow. I came across Bambi, and I didn't stay long with her because she was had just been born. I didn't want to stress her out. I took a couple of frames, and I was actually going to the other side of the meadow where I saw people standing under a tree, which usually in the Smokies means there's a black bear in the tree. And so I went over there. Sure enough, there was a mother with her cubs in the tree, and she was there. And then she came down, and so we all scurried away, and she went out in the meadow and she picked up another fawn, not my fawn, but another one, and she took it behind a tree, and she's crunching on it. And it's, from here to the back of the room, and there's like 5 of us standing here listening to it. I have this nice camera, and this local man, he looks at me, he sees that I have a real camera. He goes, "Y'all want to see that bear?" I'm like going, "Yeah, I'd love to." He walks over right next to the tree and shakes a bush. And the bear comes out. Looks at him.
Hi there.
Whereupon then the bear settles down, goes back, starts crunching. The guy turns to me and goes, "Well, did you get it?" I don't think so. He went and did it again. And then, knowing that we don't manipulate pictures, I said, "You know what? That branch really bothers me. Can you go break that branch off?"
You're allowed to crop.
Yeah, we can crop that. Yeah. And then, I get paid to stand in the stream and watch leaves go down, When you see something, that you see every day, try and think about how, you can make it different. Or, the fact that, I watched leaves going down streams, but I had never realized, in this particular case, the shadow was going with it. So I slowed down the shutter speed, probably a 15th, and I panned with the leaf. And since I wanted to go over 4 seasons, I did go in the winter. They had 1 day of winter there, and I saw it on the Weather Channel, got down there, got this shot. But while I was there over 4 seasons, I did something that I always wanted to do, which was to shoot a tree over 4 seasons from the same spot. And it works pretty well digitally, where they go one over the other. And so I was down at Geographic. At this time I've done these stories and pretty successful. Everyone's happy with me. And I proposed a few more that had not been accepted, and the director of photography was there, and I made an appointment to see him, and I said, I don't have any work right now. Do you have any work, that you'd like to give me? "Oh," he said, "I'm embarrassed." That's a good sign, right? So he goes over to his book and he looks in and he goes, "How would you like to go to Kranatsky Zapovednik?" I'd love to go there. But it's my policy to get back to you tomorrow. So quickly I ran back to the other room and went online, typed in Kranatsky Zapovednik. Where is Kranatsky Zapovednik? I learned that a Zapovednik is the highest form of wilderness in Russia. And Kranatsky is in Kamchatka. In Kamchatka, if you take the Aleutian Islands and you extend them to where they hit Russia, that's where Kranatsky is. So when Sarah Palin says she can see Russia from her window, it's Kranatsky she's looking at. Yeah. So I went there, and Geographic has these toys, one of them being a camera trap where you put, an infrared beam, the animal intercepts the infrared beam, and it takes its own picture. And so I took one of those with me, and I got there, and then I realized that I had not asked the obvious question, which is, can you bait the trap with food? And so I caught a salmon out of the river, and I put it in front of the camera trap, and nothing came for days. The salmon started to rot, And finally, this one female showed up and took her own picture. It's really almost dark, so she's moving, right? So it's a combination of a long shutter speed and the flash freezes it. So then I decided, well, since I didn't ask the obvious question and I'm in the middle of nowhere without a satellite phone, I'll just do the right thing, which is not to bait it. And so I moved the camera trap to a trail, a bear trail along the river, and I figured I'll set it up here. And bears are really smart, and I'm very spiritual and, you know, telepathic. I figure I can talk to the bears. I was like, hey, this is what I want. Here's Kronotski volcano in the background. I want the river. Okay, so you guys got it? So first bear comes along. I didn't specify sunset versus sunrise, and the mountain has to be out. So I had gone away and I came back again, set it up again, thinking a little harder, talking to the bears. The next one comes along. Oh. Better, but you know what I found out afterwards? See how wet he is?
Yeah.
What the bears do is they go upstream, they get in the river, they go downstream, and as the salmon that's coming up bumps into them, they put their foot on it, and then they go down and they eat it. Then they walk upstream. So now I realized when I got home, I set up the whole camera trap backwards. But I'm still ignorant at this point, right? So this is my last chance. I've gone off to another part of the park. I come back. It's getting colder. I'm about to leave. I set it one more try. And this bear comes by and looks at me and says, "You're kidding, right?" This is not what I do. I take pictures, you know, looking through the viewfinder. And this is my last day at Kronotski. We're flying out. I timed it for the helicopter to pick me up the night before, and we took off at sunrise and got this shot. You know, and what I do best is see, you know. So I'm just out there looking. It's like Yellowstone without cars, people, or anything. It's just an amazing place. Geysers. We're in a caldera here. And there are a lot of bears there. In fact, there's so many bears there. When I first contacted the park, I said, I'd like to come. And they said, that's fine, we don't have a problem, but you have to be with a ranger all the time who carries a gun. And I thought about that, and I said, okay, well, that's good, but I need a ranger who does not drink vodka or anything, right, carrying a gun. Well, they looked really hard. Really, it was a long search. They only found one person, and she was beautiful. She had red hair. She cooked for me, strong like bull, and had a great sense of humor. We had a great time together. Yeah, and this bear is fattened up on blueberries. Actually walking through a blueberry field. Lenticular clouds over Kronotski. You know, sometimes you have to hike a little bit and, you know, hope that you get the good light. There's a little storm that came through along the coastal plain, a mud pot, okay, that created this pattern. Yeah, it was amazing. This is the first time I saw it, and I went back, you know, multiple times and never got the pattern again. It was just, you know, one circle. You know, that's what it looks like. That's what we know it to look like from Yellowstone. The first week I was there, I was really sick. I could hardly get off the ground. And while I was lying on the ground being sick, I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty. You know, let's get the camera out. And I was pretty depressed. You know, nothing was going on. It was foggy. I hadn't seen any bears. I was really sick. So I thought if I dressed up my guide and the biologist in bear outfits, I could get a shot. No, I'm just kidding. These two bears came from opposite directions, met each other, greeted each other like this, and then went off fishing. And then geysers there too. This is the Valley of the Geysers, and this is the last shot here of this series. The sun is rising, right? So it's backlit here. I'm going to take some questions. We'll take a break, or feel free to take a break while I take questions. Yes, sir.
When you rent a plane, do you make arrangements to have an open door?
When I rent a plane, when I charter a plane, do I make arrangements to have an open door? So far, I've only found one pilot who will actually take the door off. Helicopters, you can take the door off, but airplanes a little trickier. But the Cessnas, they have windows on hinges like this, and they have a little stop, so you can't open them more than this. But if you take that one Phillips head screw out of that little stop, it goes up and it stays up in the slipstream. The pilots don't like you to do that because a lot of people just open it and let it go and it bangs up. But if you open it like this and you just take it up gently, then it'll stay up. And so I encourage you to do that. Yeah, and they're fairly inexpensive compared to helicopters. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, you mentioned that you use neutral density filters and polarizer filters, and also that you shoot on the tripod sometimes just to make sure that the horizon line is straight. And since you can do those things in Lightroom, I'm just wondering, do you do it because National Geographic demands it, or because you think it's better photographically speaking to do it that way?
That's a good question. So the question was, I use polarizers, I use graduated neutral density filters, and I use tripods. I said to make sure it's level. I use them also for long exposures too. But you can do all that in Lightroom. And so the answer to that question is, I don't think you can do in Lightroom what a polarizer does, especially reflection off the water. And I will talk about polarizers and graduated neutral density filters later. And the only reason now that I use a graduated neutral density filter is to bring that histogram within a working space or workable space. So if I'm blowing out the highlights, if I'm exposing somewhere and I'm blowing out the highlights, I can't do anything in Lightroom. Well, actually Lightroom has gotten so good that it can recover some of that highlight that's been blown out. But that's the only reason why I'm doing it now. And I used to do it in film because you had no choice. And the tripod I'll use just because I like to, for a number of reasons, long exposures, I like to step back. Once the camera's on the tripod and the picture's there, I like to stand back and take it in. Okay, sometimes I might put it on live view and see what it looks like that way, you know, showing on the back of the camera instead of looking through the viewfinder. But it's always nice to take a step back no matter what. Even if it's putting the camera down, if it's not on the tripod. Yes, sir.
Do you meter mostly with your histogram, or do you use spot metering?
Do I meter mostly with my histogram, or do I use a spot meter? I meter, I use the matrix metering, but I've been doing it long enough to know that if I'm exposing over here, I want it to be a little underexposed. If I'm exposing up there, I want it to be a little overexposed. But I will shoot one frame, I'll look at the histogram, and then I will adjust the exposure and go from there. So the answer to your question, mostly from the histogram.
In between those two times, are you usually just figuring out the shots, or you're...
What am I doing in the 12 hours between sunrise and sunset? I'll talk about different lighting, but I'm either, I'm on the computer seeing what I shot in the room, or I'm scouting. You know, I'm scouting because you can see stuff even though the light's not any good, but you know where to go back to. Yeah, there's no downtime. You know, there's very little sleep, very little downtime. Yes?
Could you just talk about the tripods that you use?
The tripods that I only use 2 tripods. They're both carbon fiber, and they're both made by Gitzo. One I put on my backpack. It's pretty light, but it goes up this high, because I don't, you know, if I want to bend down, and then the other one is heavier for the big lens. It has a Wembley head on it, so it's a 500 millimeter lens, and so it, you know, that's the big tripod, and I don't carry that far from the car or whatever vehicle that I'm at, but they're both carbon fiber. Let's talk about light and what do I do on the downtime. So like I said before, you know, to me, seeing is more important than technique. And light is most important. Seeing the light. My friend Ralph has a saying, Ralph Lee Hopkins, who travels on the ship, find the light and shoot what's in it. And I think that's a really good saying. So I'm going to show you, there's only 4 qualities of light that I work with. Diffuse light, side light, backlight, and magic light. You don't see harsh light in my pictures unless I'm in the Caribbean or somewhere where I can use a polarizer and see into the water. So I will use that middle of the day to scout. I like to shoot at sunset or after sunset. I'll use the middle of the day to scout. And then I'll return there, you know, when I think the weather's good or that there might be a shot. So we'll talk about diffuse light. I love diffuse light. That's when it's raining or just overcast. And the reason why I love it in particular is that I can work all day long. I don't have to go, you know, the lighting is terrible. And, you know, especially when it's raining, you can, you know, it saturates the foliage, you know. And yes, I don't know if I used a polarizer here because I'm seeing some shine off here. But a polarizer will take that shine off and really saturate the colors. But, you know, when I was a commercial photographer in Manhattan, we used these lights like what's hanging here. Big banks of, you know, soft lights. You can see them out here. That is our ideal lighting. You know, whenever you see any ads or portraits or anything in the magazines that have been lit, they've been using these lights. And so when it's overcast, that's God's softbank, you know, it's just one huge softbank coming down. And, you know, if you don't include the sky, you can get beautiful detail ranged from the highlights to the shadows, you know. And I generally don't include the sky, but, you know, sometimes if it's worthy, I will. In this case, it was like, you know, there was no wind at all on this lake. And it's really good for portraiture, whether animals or people. Beautiful soft light. Don't go taking the family portrait, you know, where everyone's lined up and the sun is over your shoulder and they're all looking, you know, like George Bush into the light, you know. So I was actually, I had taken this in Alaska and I was down at Geographic and when we were editing, I seem to drink a lot of coffee when I'm down there and have a Caribou coffee on the corner. And I was waiting for my white chocolate mocha. And you know how you wait and wait and wait. And there was a poster there, and there was a caribou, you know, with big sunglasses, an iPod in its ears. And I'm looking at it, I'm waiting for my coffee, and I go, wait, that's my picture. Sure enough, there it is. That was the next day. It was in USA Today. I was like, wow, this is great. I'm gonna have free coffee the rest of my life. Yeah. So back to diffuse light. I love fog. That's the ultimate diffuse light. This was one day at Great Smoky Mountains. The sun's coming up. You can see it's kind of bouncing off the clouds up above, that pink light. And then, you know, the sun goes up into the clouds and, you know, the color temperature changes dramatically, right? So be aware of that. Look at the light. Side light is my other favorite light. That's when the sun is low and it's at a right angle to me, which is the way that a polarizer works when the sun is at a right angle to you.
Where is that taken, please?
That was up at Bristlecone Pine. It's in the White Mountains in California, outside of Bishop, California. Route 395 goes north and south. It's they're 10,000 feet. They're the oldest living trees. Could be on the planet. They're like 2,000 years old. Death Valley again, side lit, sun rising. You know, I can get the texture in the sand this way. At Kranotsky, the sun's come up, it's hit the mountain, the volcano, side lit. 10 minutes later, the color temperature has changed dramatically, but it's still an interesting picture because it's side lit. You know, don't ever have the sun over your shoulder, ever. Okay, you know. Some of you are old enough to remember those Kodak boxes. You opened them up, you got a little piece of paper. They told you know, there was a little picture and the sun was over your shoulder and it told you what f-stop to use. You know, that's why Kodak's out of business now. I'm bad, aren't I? Yeah.
Other reasons.
Yeah, other reasons too.
How do you adjust your white balance, or did you use it automatic?
I put it on auto white balance. The question is, how do I adjust my white balance? I'm shooting raw,
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter. You can set on anything, because when you bring it into Lightroom or Aperture, you set it. And so what I do is I'll set everything when I bring it in, at daylight. Or I'll bring it in as what the camera saw it as. So I'll put it on auto white balance and bring it in and look at it on the computer. And I find with the Nikon, it's quite a bit cooler. The Nikon is seeing the images cooler than the Canon. It's a little bit like what happened to Kodak. Well, they got Fujiized. And Fuji came in and their film, the Velvia, was really warm. And then we looked at the Kodak film and we looked at Fuji film and go, I'm shooting Fuji from now on, you know. So, yeah, and so I'd like this. I just set it on auto white balance and I could adjust it later, you know. Side lighting, you know. So like I said, all you gotta do is charter an airplane, you know, for an hour. And, you know, in the past, you know, when I was starting out, it was like I'd charter an airplane for 2 hours, I'd fly around for an hour and 45 minutes, and then the good light would come. And then I had a pilot once, he says, you get 1 hour, and that's it. You know, so you choose your hour. And that's when I realized, well, you know, half hour before sunset, 40 minutes before sunset, and a little bit after maybe. And so the point is side lit, okay? Makes it much more interesting. Also good for portraits, side lighting, whether it's people or animals. Personally, I hate people, so no, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
What's the standard ISO you shoot with?
What ISO do I shoot with? Generally, and again, this is changing dramatically, right? With each camera that comes out. You know, I was brought up to shoot the slowest film I could, the lowest ISO. I shot 50 ISO all the time, no matter what. And it carries over it to digital. You know, the lower the ISO, the better the quality. But you want to have a picture. So if you're hand holding and you're blurring the camera, well, you can bump the ISO up. And now with the Nikon and the Canons and the Panasonics and the Sonys, everyone, you could shoot at ISO 1,000 or 2,000. You can't tell the difference. In fact, I sold some pictures recently to Apple for their Retina display. They don't even want film. Okay, they needed the best digital because that Retina display is so amazing. So, back to light. So backlighting is my favorite. Okay, you know, diffuse light, yes, I can work all day long. Backlight creates things that are kind of magical to me. Okay, and with the zoom lenses, you got to be very careful that that sun is not creating flare in the lens, right? And so when you're pointing the camera into the sun, you know, like here, the sun has already gone down into the cloud just slightly. Otherwise, I'd get flare. Like the frame before this, I got flare happening, these little spots coming across my image. And then I got this shot, and then the next shot, it's gone, it's into the cloud. This is backlit, right? I'm pointing the camera into the sun, but not directly, kind of down and into the sun. Again, backlit, the sun is going down. This is Grand Geyser. And I was lucky again. I think I waited here for an hour or two for that to go off. Okay, Great Smoky Mountains. The sun is now, in this picture, the sun is up, probably up here, and it's up high in the sky. And the other thing you want to do, if you don't have the sun in there, you want to block the sun, okay, from shining into your lens. So if the sun is not part of the picture, take your hand and put it until you see a shadow fall onto the lens. Okay, and you want to make sure if you're looking through, you want to make sure your hand is not in the picture. But sometimes I'll use a cable release, or I'll put it on, 2-second delay or 4-second delay, and I'll walk away from the camera and create a shadow over the lens. In this case,
Are you using a neutral density filter on these?
I'm not using a neutral density or graduated neutral density. No, these are straight shots into the sun, and then the sun goes down, the color temperature changes, okay? The mood of the picture changes. Also great for portrait work, backlighting. You have to expose correctly, right? So now you're going to expose more on the face that's in the shadow, and it's going to blow out the background a little more. It's going to get lighter. Of course, the cameras now, they have a little button that says backlighting, right? You can push that button and it compensates. I don't use that button because it'll only mess me up because I'm already thinking the way I should be thinking. But if you are shooting, you know, into the sun is up, try and hide it behind a branch or something, okay? So it's hidden here, it's not creating any flare, and I'm still getting, look at all this great detail here, even though it's backlit. And then, of course, everyone's favorite light, magic light. And how do you predict magic light? Well, you know it's magic when you look at it and you go, oh my God, look at that, right? Like that was magical. I'm sitting there in the fog and it pulled out and it was magical. This was magical. Yeah, this was a storm in North Dakota, and you know a minute later it's raining like crazy. And this was film, some of you may remember, we had little gelatin filters we put in front of the lens to change the color temperature. Now you just slide it afterwards. Yes, sir?
What exactly is magic light?
What exactly is magic? Magic light is when you look at it and you go, where's my camera? Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's just really special lighting, can come from anywhere. You can't predict it. You know, it's not diffuse light, it's not side light, it's not backlight. It's magical. You know, this is after the sunset. You know, I just waited around and I got this alpenglow, you know, and I thought it was pretty magical. And rainbows are always magical. That's the only time you can shoot with the sun over your shoulder, okay? Because it's the only time you get a rainbow is when it's raining there and the sun is here, okay? And when you're going to Machu Picchu next week, you can predict it. You know, you can see the rain is happening, the sun is there. You know when that sun comes out and it's raining over there, you want to get yourself in the spot where you want to be. So when the rainbow happens, you're at the, what's it called? Something to the sun. What is it? To the hitching post to the sun. It's a good place to go when that rainbow happens. I hope it happens for you. I've been there 3 times. I've had rainbows all 3 times. Yeah. But only if you go with Lindblad. It doesn't work if you go with A and K.
I am.
Good. This was magical light, okay? I waited for multiple hours, you know. It was like, here was this great storm. It was clearing. I saw patches of blue and the sun was shining, and the sun would shine there as the clouds were moving and the sun was shining over there. And this is the shot I wanted. And it was just waited till the sun, you know, the sun got lower, and I got, you know, just this little band of light that came across the town. Now, like I said, I never shoot with the sun over my shoulder, okay, but I did here. It was an overcast day, kind of like that picture from Acadia, okay, where I could see there was a sliver of blue that went all the way around, and I knew the sun was going to come underneath that cloud and light everything. And so I got off the highway and I'm looking around, trying to find something, a barn. I found this barn, but it didn't look compositionally very good side-lit. And then when it did happen, well, I was caught, and there I was. And so I took the picture, and there you are. And then another time, same thing. I had this beautiful storm that was clearing. I saw that it was completely moving out and clear to the west. This is down in Lancaster County in Pennsylvania. And so I got off the highway, I'm looking around, it's Amish country, and I found this tomato field and I'm shooting it. I have kind of trying to find the picture. And I look over on the road next to me, and next to the field, and there's 2 girls on bicycles. They're standing there watching me. So I called them over. Turns out a couple of young Amish girls, they'd picked these tomatoes. And so I'm talking with them, and I'm knowing that the light is getting better, or is going to get better. And then when the light got really good, I asked them if I could take their picture. And I had them stand there. Yeah, I like that picture. And then I went home with these girls, you know, to where they live, which was really amazing. The Amish, have any of you ever been around an Amish community? They are amazing people. Nothing on their walls, okay? There's no vanity at all. And so the mother made quilts, and she wanted me to come and photograph all her quilts, you know, for catalog. And so I got home, I made a print of this, And I sent it to her and I said, I will come down and photograph all your prints. In return, I want to live with you for a couple of weeks and photograph your community. Good idea, right? Never heard from her. I'll use a flash to make it look like I have not used a flash, okay? Just fill flash. Catch light in the eyes, okay? You have not seen any pictures, you've not seen any pictures that I've used a flash on. So I like to keep it simple. And so generally I will not. If I have a commercial job that requires a little fill flash, then I'll take it. You know, I remember I used to be a commercial photographer, so I've used a lot of big flashes. So it's like for me, you know, I've died and gone to heaven if I don't use artificial lighting ever again. But fill flash is great if you tone it down. And the little point and shoot cameras, I love those point and shoot cameras. And the first thing I do with all of them, if I get one, is I take the flash compensation, I take it down 2 stops. Because they're so bright, you know, those point and shoots, you take a picture, it's terrible. You tone it down 2 stops, you hardly know that you've used it, but it fills it in beautifully. Tips on seeing light: get up early, stay out late, change your position. Remember I talked about that before. When you find something that you really like, walk around it. And as you learn lighting, also, you know, when the sun is low, take a series of pictures and see if I'm correct. That, you know, the sun over your shoulder, at a right angle to you, looking into the sun, you know, walk around it and experiment with backlighting, of course.
Say 8 or what do you?
What's my favorite f-stop? Well,
For landscape.
for landscape, you know, it depends if I want a really shallow depth of field. If I'm shooting animals, you know, or a leaf or something, I'll shoot wide open. If I'm shooting water, you know, and I want a lot of motion, you know, I probably want a 2-second exposure, so whatever f-stop I need. If I want to shoot a landscape, you know, with a wide angle, and I'll show it to you in a minute, front to back, I'll stop down to 16-22. So it, you know, there's no, the sharpest f-stop is 3 stops from wide open. So if you have a lens that's 2.8, 4, 5, 6, 8 is the sharpest. Okay, so now we can't use the high dynamic range feature at Geographic. But I know that Ansel Adams is screaming to get back here, so, because this is what Ansel was all about in black and white. He would expose one way, he would develop another, so he could manipulate in the darkroom before he even made a print to get all the range he wanted in a picture. How many of you are playing with HDR? Yeah, it is amazing if used correctly. Now, I haven't played with it much, but I'm just going to show you. Even my cell phone, my iPhone, has HDR capability, right? I mean, it's crazy. So what does HDR do? It takes the normal exposure, like that's my normal exposure. You know, I got some detail down here, nothing's blown out. So you take one exposure, then you take another exposure 2 stops under. So you're now exposing for the sky. Then you do another exposure 2 stops over to expose for this area. You combine them with software. Photoshop has some. Photomatics, is that what it's called? That's what I've used. And you combine them and you get this picture, you know, which if you look here, you know, is pretty amazing. Even if on a tripod, yes, you have to be on a tripod, and you're varying the shutter speed, not the aperture, okay? Because if you vary the aperture, it might throw something off.
If you shoot high shutter speed, you don't need to be on a tripod either.
If you're shooting, yeah, auto bracketing at a high shutter speed and you're not moving, and it goes like that, or like that, right? Then you don't have to be on a tripod. But the theory is if there's anything moving in the picture, it's going to mess up your HDR. Okay, so that's the original picture. So it's a huge improvement. Now, you have to know what you're doing. Okay, so here's Kronotsky as it was shot, you know, 2 stops over, 2 stops under for those clouds, and I combine them together. Well, that, you know, that's terrible. That doesn't look like a photograph. I would take that and throw it right away. Okay, but if you know what you're doing, it works. Okay, this was down in the Galapagos. okay, and it was kind of an overcast day. I mean, that's the amazing thing about the iPhone. This isn't the iPhone, but you know, there's an app for the iPhone called Camera Plus. I mean, it's just amazing. I went on a trip, and there was a woman from Louisiana, and she had a really wonderful eye. She showed me this Camera Plus, like this. It basically will take a picture like this and make it look like it will when I'm done here. So there's 2 stops under. Look, it's just, there is no detail. There's really nothing going on in that sky. 2 stops over, and you combine them in HDR. Look at it, isn't that pretty? Yeah, it's so much better. And you can't tell that I cheated completely on this. Well, I guess it wouldn't be cheating if it didn't work for Geographic. So let's go over what's in my bag and my lenses and the filters I use, okay? So here's the Canon bag, and 100 to 400, then that got replaced by a 70 to 300 just because it was sharper. I love the 100 to 400. 16 to 35, 24 to 105. So we go 1635 to 105 to 400. So I got everything from 16 to 400 in the bag. And I used to carry a fanny pack with just 1 camera body. But when I went digital, and every time I changed lenses, I had those dust bunnies, dust getting on my sensor, which was really a pain. I switched and started carrying 2 camera bodies. And now I like this system because when I find something, I take the camera pack and I put it on the ground, and I'm completely free. Now I put the camera on a tripod, I'm even freer, okay? Batteries, headlamps, levels in here. Usually I have a point and shoot in here. Now well, I'll show you the Nikon setup. My filters, my graduated neutral density filters are there. I had the 5D Mark II, which is a full frame lens camera body there, and I had a 7D here. So then it's cropped body. So my long lens became longer. So I had the full frame for the wider angle, and then I had the crop body for the long lens. Now my camera bag looks like this. $30,000 more. Should be lighter, not heavier. So I got the 105 macro in there. Sometimes I take that out and put my instruction manual, which is about this thick, right? In there, cable release. So same thing, 16 to 35 is considerably bigger than the Canons. 24 to 120 is it? And 70 to 200 in there. And again, filters, batteries, headlamps, that's pretty much it. So 99% of my pictures are taken with that system.
So now that you've got the 70 to 200, do you bring along a teleconverter to get it beyond?
That's a good question. Now that I have the 70 to 200, do I use the teleconverter? You know, I haven't had this system but a month maybe. So yes, I bought all 3 converters, 1.4, 1.7, and 2X. And I bought the 500, and I bought the 200 to 400 zoom, which I don't see myself using that very much. It's such a monster.
Question about the teleconverters. Do they distort your images a little bit, or don't they also kick off your autofocus?
No, the teleconverters have improved incredibly over the last few years. So no, I still have autofocus. With the 500, I think I may only have it in the center.
Oh, really?
With one of them. Maybe it's the 2X.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, they're so much better. Now, we'll just go through those lenses.
Are both cameras 800?
They're both, yeah, actually, I went overboard. I got 2 800Ds and a D800E, the one without the anti-alias, and it is sharper. But it has some issues, supposedly, with moire patterns in clothing. So 1635 wide angle. This is my normal lens. I use it more than I should. Foreground, middle ground, background, landscapes. A couple of examples, right? I like to get something close to me in the foreground and let your eye carry on. good for aerial work. Actually, the aerial work, I don't really need that 16 quite so much, and usually you get, you end up with the wing and the tire and everything. So I'll use the 24 to 120 or the 24 to 105 for the aerial work. Here's the 24 to 105. It's good for, it's a normal lens, and I'll use it for patterns or something that I don't want to go an extreme one way or the other. So because I use the 16 to 35 so much, I'm always looking for long lens shots, okay? And so I'm always pressing myself to see that other way. And so I really like the long lens shot. And I'll use filters, like natural foliage, kind of as a filter around. So I'm shooting through leaves to kind of soften it and give it some color. Okay, I have to tell you the story of this one. Yeah. So I got the 500 millimeter. Oh, is this the? No, this was the 100 to 400. And I'm there at Katmai National Park, Brooks Camp in Alaska. And you're supposed to stay 50 yards away from the bears. And there are all these males at the waterfall. That picture where you see where the bear's mouth is open and the salmon's jumping into it, it's shot there. Well, I saw this female, and there's some cabins there, and she knows that the males will kill her kids because it brings her into estrus sooner. And so she's staying away from the falls. She's trying to get some salmon wherever she can. But she wanted to take a nap, so she brings her cubs over by the cabin to take a nap because she knows the males won't be there. So I'm standing with my back to a cabin. I know I'm completely safe. And the bears are like to the back of the room. They're pretty close. And they're sleeping. And I got my camera on the tripod. I'm just waiting. And they're sleeping. Well, a ranger walked over. He saw me, he saw the bears. He started yelling at the top of his lungs at me for being too close to the bears. He woke them up.
I knew it.
And the bears stood on the back of them. They wanted to see what was going on. So I got the shot and I thanked him. The bears wandered off. And this was also in Alaska. This is a crazy pilot. You're talking about pilots. So this guy, I said, I'd really like to get some shots of you, against the mountain. Maybe we'll take 2 planes. He goes, oh no, we can do it with 1. So, yeah, so he landed on a little strip of snow like this, right?
Yep.
Tiny thing. So he just landed, and just before we stopped, he turned the plane around and pointed it down. And then he said, okay, you can get out now. Yeah. Okay, filters. Like I said, I only use 2 filters, and to me, if you learn nothing else, you'll learn to go out and buy, right here at B&H, a polarizer for your camera. I have polarizing sunglasses, and I am all the time, because you got to rotate the filter to see what it does. I walk down the street like this. Did you ever see Dory in Finding Nemo? Did you ever see Finding Nemo? Yeah, well, I'm Dory, a little dizzy. Anyway, so what does it do? Okay, so here it has to be at a right angle to you, okay? Late afternoon light, side lighting, I love it. There it is, no polarization, and then you turn the filter and it darkens the sky, takes the reflection off of water and materials. What it does is basically, lights out there, it's scattering all around. And when you turn the polarizer, it basically is eliminating all that scattered light, and it's lining it up all nicely. And so it's cutting through the haze. When I'm shooting in an airplane, I'll always use a polarizer because it cuts through all that haze. So here's a sunset. I mean, it's a really nice picture. You don't really need a polarizer, but if you do polarize it, well, it just pops, right?
Geographic allows polarizers?
Yes, Geographic allows us. And we can do anything, that we used to be able to do in the darkroom or anything beforehand. Okay, we can put filters on front, we can polarize, we can use graduated neutral density filters. But if we do like a sequence of pictures and stitch them together, they will say at the bottom, this is 5 pictures stitched together. So I'm looking for the day when they say this is HDR, because I'll be all over it. This is not an interesting picture, but I just shot it to show you. This is looking directly north at sunset. You know, the sun is just about to go down. No polarization. Polarization. I mean, it's just, you know, it also works great with water, okay? No polarization. When you see reflections on water here, you polarize it, and you see right into the water. Like fishermen, you know, we always use polarizing sunglasses. We can see the fish in the water. It makes it a lot easier to know you're fishing for real fish as opposed to nothing. And
Also wrapping up your saturation and or vibrance.
am I in the, are these a little more saturated? I'm shooting raw, you've got to. You know, those raw files are so dull. But you know, if you just look at them as files and not images, you can, you know, you have to tweak them a little bit. For me, my goal with digital photography is to make my files look the way Velvia made them look on film. If I show you two pictures side by side, I don't want you to say one is digital and the other is film, you know, color-wise. The thing you got to watch out for with the polarizer with a wide angle is, you know, it polarizes at 90 degrees, but here, you know, this it's not polarizing over here. So you end up with these little spots sometimes. Here's a picture that I polarized to take the reflection off the water. It also darkened the sky a little bit because the sun's to my right there.
Where is that?
That's in Utah at Glen Canyon, Lake Powell. Apple bought this picture. If you go to the Apple store and you look at their retina displays on their laptops, this is one of the images you'll be looking at. Now, the graduated neutral density filter was really much more important pre-Lightroom 4 than it is now. And certainly I used it for film because we didn't manipulate, didn't change anything afterwards. So this is no graduated neutral density filter. You know, I want to darken the sky a little and see in here a little bit. And that's all it does. Here's another picture, okay, that if I didn't have the graduated neutral density filter on there, and you can't tell I have it on there, the top would be blown out because the sun is there. Look at it, I'm exposing for way down here. And so just by doing that, but now with Lightroom 4 or Aperture, you know, that you can, well, Aperture doesn't have that graduated ND, does it? You know, you don't need it quite as much unless you're blowing out the sky. So your exposure digitally should be a little overexposed, okay? You think of it as color negative film. You want to overexpose it a little bit, but you don't want to blow out the highlights. So if you're seeing, if these clouds are all flashing, then you got to either bring the exposure down a little bit or put a graduated neutral density filter on top. Same thing here. Look, I've got full sun, white sun up there, and look at, I'm exposing way down in here. So I've got the graduated neutral density on there. Yes, sir.
How many stops is your filter? Do you use the progressive or the gradual, or do you use the really sharp edge?
No, I use the gradual for the wide angle. It's 2 stops, and you can get them here at B&H. I use high-tech, but it doesn't really matter what brand you use. And I'll use the sharp one for the longer lenses. But quite frankly, I hardly ever use it with a longer lens. It's really a wide angle thing for me. Now, just a word from our other sponsor. So, let's see, I got 20 minutes. I'm going to blow you through. I'm going to take you with me on some of the trips that I've done with Lindblad. So I'm really blessed that I get to go along on these amazing trips to help people take better pictures on them. And I get to be one of the guests, but I get to talk about myself all the time, which is great. So let's go from south to north, okay? Antarctica, and I finally got to go to South Georgia this past February. I've been asking for 3 years. I've been doing these trips for 4 years, I think, something like that. And I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. You got to go across the Drake Passage, okay, from the tip of South America to the Antarctic Peninsula, and there is no land all the way around the Earth who's stopping the waves, you know, because the Earth's going like this and the waves are doing this. So you're, you know, traveling for a day on a ship that's doing this. Personally, I just sleep for 24 hours. It seems to work for me. And then you get, you know, you get to have some cool storms, and then you get down there, and it's like otherworldly. It's so cool. And we go in our winter, their summer, right? So it's really, you know, everyone, you get these really cool coats, and maybe it's 32 degrees. I mean, I don't ever feel, you know, I wear my ski gear, and I'm never really, really cold. Okay, polarizer, here's a shot, okay, that no polarizer, and then I polarized it. I mean, can you believe that? You know, what a difference. You can't even see that cloud up above there, but when you polarize it, it does that. And that's all I've done to that picture. I've done nothing else to it. And they got these really cool zodiacs. You know, wherever you are, you go out in the zodiacs and you take these tours and you tour around these icebergs, and you don't get too close to them, okay? Because, you know, so I used what? A 100 to 400 to compress it. And then we land and take walks. Emperor penguins, yeah. That was really, this was the first time that they had ever gone this far south and gone to this emperor penguin colony. I was very happy about this. Adelie penguins, chinstrap penguins, they are so cute. I mean, they're just amazing. After you go to the Galapagos, you're going to be going to Antarctica next. When I meet people on the ship, it's like, I ask them, what's your first trip? They either say the Galapagos or Antarctica.
Did you use tripod for those shots on the ice?
No, I didn't. I don't even generally take a tripod with me on the ship, because you can't really use it on the ship because it's moving. And when you're on the land, you're kind of walking a lot. You don't have a lot of time. You all stay in a group, so I kind of call it drive-by shooting. You know, but it's not bad for drive-by shooting. You know, and then so we land here. There's this huge colony. And you know, you can choose to either hang out on the beach or go for a hike. You know, and so I'm experimenting with different shutter speeds, right? Again, it's handheld, right? But I'm slowing down the shutter speed to get some motion, or I'll speed up the shutter speed to stop motion. Okay, so these guys are, you know, they all go in a crowd. They're trying to go into the water to go feed, but they know there's a
You've crouched down on that shot?
Yes, I've crouched down on it. Where, this one?
Right.
This one here. Yeah. So I'm probably on my knee. I don't know if I'm lying on the ground. Probably not, because it's close to the water. And you get these huge icebergs that are as large as city blocks here. You know, it's just amazing. And you know, light. It's not over my shoulder, is it? No, it's to the left. Good. And the Sphinx started down there. They have whales down there. You know, it says it's so rich in krill down there. How many of you saw that amazing series called The Frozen Planet? Yeah, wasn't that amazing? Yeah. So, you know, after you shoot, you know, a couple of thousand whale tails, you know, you think, well, how can I make it a little different? So I slowed down the shutter speed and got a little more motion going on in it. It's not a bad job if you can get it. And it's just amazing. The icebergs, you know, because there's so much more below the waterline than above it. And here's, you know, some Cape Petrels that are flying along with the ship. Okay, I shot them. How can I make it more interesting? I'll slow down the shutter speed. I love motion. Okay, that's one example. Here's another example. So I'm getting the sun off of the water. So in this case, you know, I'm stopped all the way down in order to get that. I probably put a polarizer on. I'm trying to put as much in front of that lens to slow down the shutter speed as possible. Oh, it's probably that's the 70 to 300. That's probably the 100 to 400.
And that's still on aperture priority?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I might switch to shutter priority in that case. You know, if I know that the perfect exposure is the 30th of a second, then I'll switch to shutter priority. Yes. Or I might even go to manual.
Are you panning with that, or just?
Well, the ship's moving,
Okay.
and so you know they'll come and fly, and I'll kind of pan with them as they fly by. This was with a point and shoot camera, you know, and I put the flash on. You can't see that I've used the flash, toned down 2 stops. Now, I'm just lying on the ground. You know, they're like from me to you. You know, I'm lying on the ground, and they're very curious, so they come and want to see what's going on. Yeah, South Georgia. You can see why I waited 3 years to go there. Did not disappoint. These are king penguins, and it's really amazing.
How does it smell?
It smelled, but so do I, you know, so. And we go there, we hit the beach at sunrise, so you gotta be quick. I had a tripod. I did take a tripod with me, so I went with some slower shutter speeds, and you know, I shot and shot until I got the image I wanted, which, I mean, maybe I only had 10 frames because we have guests that are walking through my picture, and so, you know, you can't yell at the guests. You're not allowed to anymore. Now, I took this picture, actually I took the next one to show you why I don't like to shoot with the sun out when I'm shooting with animals, and especially over my shoulder. Well, I should just say over my shoulder. So here, the sun has not come up yet behind the mountain, and here it comes up, and everyone's happy because it's now sunny, except for me. Because personally, I think this picture is more interesting than this picture. Do you agree? No? Who doesn't agree? You don't agree. All right, well, it's personal. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about art and photography. It's all personal, whatever turns you on. Okay, and you don't have to show the whole animal. Okay? So it's probably a, you know, 300 millimeter lens. The penguin's right here, and I'm shooting wide open because I don't want to see what's going on in the background. Now, panning with animals, especially birds, can be a real frustrating experience, right? So, you know, you're panning with a bird. Most of my pictures look like this. They're out of focus, and every once in a while, the camera will lock in on them, and then I look good, you know. And then, you know, what a difference. And you just got to shoot a lot. Albatross. There's a little advertising for the ship. That's the ship we're on. It's very comfortable. We eat really well. So I shot this, you know, you can get the environment, and then close in a little bit. Wow, I have 10 minutes to take you from the South Pole to the North Pole. So I'll just blow ahead. The Galapagos, everyone should go here, okay? Just amazing. You get a trip over these birds that are nesting on the trails. Frigate birds, the males are displaying. Boobies, blue-footed boobies, and blue-footed boobies babies. Coming in on land iguana. There's another booby. Yes, I did take a tripod there. So what did I say? I didn't take tripods on the ships? I guess I lied. So I did take one too. So the waves are crashing over the crabs. Albatross mating. You know, it's amazing. Rainbows. You can shoot with the sun over your shoulder. I used the tripod, so instead of the animal moving, the animal was standing still and I let the water move. Costa Rica and Panama, you go through the Panama Canal. That is amazing. Being a landscape guy, I was blown away by the Panama Canal. What an engineering feat. And the story behind it is amazing. And we did rest and relax a little bit. You know, when climbing around the rainforest a little bit. Saw some really cool birds. And some really cool birds. Yes, I did pan that. And you only get one chance. The sloths, though, are pretty good because they move pretty slow. You got. And then I had a guest who was kind of harassing these monkeys. So, you know, this is like the question, if, you know, you see somebody in trouble as a journalist, do you help them or do you photograph the event? So it was like, well, do I let the guest get eaten or do I take the picture? You know, or I took the picture and then I told her, I said, you really, you know, they can be pretty aggressive. Baja, and you guys do join us in Baja for this trip that we're doing. It's going to be land-based where we're going to do total instruction and then we're going to go on the ship and it should be great. Yeah, I used the polarizer. I wanted to look into the water, right? This is something that happens down there in April where the gray whales come into the lagoons. You can go out in the pongas and actually pet them. There's the ship, sea lions, and you get to swim with them. That's just a point and shoot camera underwater. He has a graduated neutral density filter on, I can tell. And then going north, let's see, I went from Seattle up to Alaska. I'm going to go through this pretty quick because we've got 6 minutes. Yeah, and we had pretty good weather up there. It hardly rained at all, but it can rain every day in Alaska. Golden Eagle. Totem poles. Into a little powwow. And then we end up in Glacier Bay. Again, taken out of the airplane, and actually I think I shot that through the window. And then they have another trip that goes to Norway. It goes along the fjords of Norway. And so you're in these Zodiacs, okay, and doesn't matter what the weather is. You got boots on, you got rain gear on, you got your camera in your backpack that's waterproof because you got it at B&H. He's bad, isn't he? Cod drying. Getting perfect instruction from your photo instructor. Composition is key. Yeah, do come with me on my next vacation. Then we end up in Svalbard where the polar bears are. You get all kinds of incredible bird life up there, walruses. You know, I mean, this is what happens. You're on the Zodiac and there's a walrus sitting right there, or many of them. And then you get to get this shot. And we go hiking. This was amazing. We had this whole group of walruses come over and check us out in the Zodiac. And then we saw a polar bear. And that's amazing. You never know. It's like fishing. Sometimes the polar bears are really far away, and sometimes they come up to the ship, and they're right next to the ship. Yeah, those were cool. That's my favorite. Thank you.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.